2017. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. Tonight's invocation will be led by Nicole Ghazi of Islamic Center of Delaware County. If you will all please rise.
So first, I'd like to thank you all for welcoming me back here to this chamber in our Islamic month of Muharram. This is a month that marks our new year. It is a month of reflection, of renewing our intention to move towards what is good and avoid what is evil, not unlike the resolutions of January 1st on our Roman calendar. And it's in this spirit of this month that I offer this prayer. God grant us courage to stand up after we have fallen and to find meaning in our failures. Grant us courage to write our own story in hopes that each of us will find strength and selflessness. Grant us courage to forgive ourselves, to seek forgiveness from those we have hurt, and to grant forgiveness to those who have hurt us. Grant us wisdom to feel anger in the face of oppression, and even greater wisdom to engage in productive work for justice. Grant us wisdom to understand that faith is not relegated to what we say or in which direction we pray, but in our actions to bring love and healing to your creation. Grant us the patience and perseverance to bear our burdens. Grant us hearts that foster friendship, lips that speak honorably, and eyes that shed tears for those who are suffering. Protect us all in this community from harm, and place love, mercy, and respect in our hearts for one another. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah. Should I say that? Did anybody take a knee? Not in Delaware. Okay, item 4, the approval of the motion summary on the regular meeting of City Council held September 11th, 2017, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
Approval. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. If you'll please read this in the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary for the Civil Service Commission meeting held July 12, 2017. Item B, establish October 9th, 2017 at 7:30 p.m. as the date and time for a public hearing and second reading of resolution number 17-57, a resolution creating a designated outdoor refreshment area, DORA, for the downtown Delaware and enacting regulations.
What is the wish of council?
Move for approval of the consent agenda. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Hellinger. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. I want to welcome all you students. So it's good to see so many faces out there, young ones. Item 6 is letters, petition, and public comments. If anybody is here that would like to come forward that is something that is not on tonight's agenda, if you'll please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll move on to committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay. Mrs. Keller?
I have nothing.
Nothing. Nothing.
Wow, that was quick. Okay. Delynn Jabode, would you meet me out front?
I'm doing well.
This gentleman was here at our last meeting and was part of the Pace Singers that sang the national anthem for us. And then he also showed up Friday night and did a solo for the Veterans Dinner. So Thank you very much. Your voice brought tears to my eyes one more time. But tonight I am honored with a proclamation for you. Whereas the City of Delaware has responsibility to recognize occasions of outstanding significance, and whereas the Lynn Jabot of Troop number 318 has earned the rank of Eagle Scout. Whereas the Eagle rank is Scouting's highest rank and carries with great honor in our community and a commitment to continue to develop leadership skills and to serve as a guide and role model for both community and nation. Whereas Lynn has been an active scout, demonstrating outstanding leadership and has contributed many service hours during his years of scouting. Whereas Lynn earned numerous merit badges and completed a community service project to create 2 buddy benches at Schultz Elementary School, which promotes the inclusion of all students, the need for friendship and awareness that no one should feel alone. Now therefore I, Carolyn K. Riggle, Mayor of the City of Delaware, do hereby this issue to proclaim and honor Lynn Jabot in the City of Delaware, Ohio. I am joined by my fellow citizens in extending with great pride and sincere congratulations to Lynn for achieving the highest of scouting awards and wish him much success in our future endeavors. Would you like to explain what your buddy bench is?
Yeah, I'll explain a little bit on what those were and how the project came to be. So, well, I was on a camp out with my troop a couple of years ago, and a lot of younger guys that were still at Schultz Elementary School, ready to cross over into our troop, were there as part of a traditional camp out we do every year. So we invite Eagle Scouts to a specific campsite. We choose a different one every year. And one of the parents was talking about how her daughter wanted to make benches at Schultz for a Girl Scout project. And at the time, the rest of the guys were on a first aid kind of requirement mission. And I overheard her talking about it. And I was like, nothing new Boy Scouts? No, do that. So at the time I was still both having a toss up as to what I wanted to do for my Eagle project. Whether or not I wanted to do something at the elementary school I went to, which was Conroe Elementary School, or something at somewhere else that had significance to me, like LCC, down on Liberty Street, or something at Hayes, if there was anything to do. But then I wanted to do the buddy benches at Schultz. I just needed to learn more about it, and made 2 buddy benches because I didn't get to see what color they got painted.
Very good. And does everybody know what a buddy bench is? Okay, good. I did not have to learn, but anyway, older than that. And congratulations to your parents also, because they're very proud of you. So thank you.
Not as good as our regular photographer. All right, 3, 2, 1. One more. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you. And item 9 is consideration of a new liquor permit. Elaine, if you'll please read this on the record.
Item A, for Tuan Nguyen LLC, doing business as Jenny's Nail Spa and Bar at 1234 Columbus Pike, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, permit class D3.
Chief Kajanowski?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is a request for a new permit. The address on this permit is inaccurate, and we were not able to complete a background on this. We did find the correct address today. Actually, Elaine did some phone calling on this, and our discussions with the business owner and the attorney were fruitless. Find the address today. There's a couple options. You could object to the permit, you could approve the permit, or we can just ask for a continuance. And due to the fact that there's probably not going to be an issue with this, but just to do our due diligence, I would ask that you consider asking for a 30-day continuance on this.
Where is the property?
It's going to be 3 doors down from the Kroger's at Delaware Community Plaza is where it's actually located. The address on here is non-existent. We were thinking it was down at Delaware Square, but just from the email that Elaine forwarded today, it's down at Community Plaza.
And Chief Pigeonowski correctly gave the 3 options. When Elaine states they recommended doing the 30-day continuance. So if you want to go with their vote, that's what they would recommend, and I probably would as well too.
Okay. So is there a motion to do a continuance for 30 days?
I move we wait for 30 days.
Second.
We'll do a roll call. Did you know who it was? It was Browning and Keller.
Okay.
That looked,
You have to be like you didn't know.
yeah, she was like, what happened?
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller? Yes. Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Helling?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Item 10 is the 3rd reading of resolution number 17-54.
Resolution number 17-54, a resolution adopting the 2018 through 2022 5-year capital improvement program.
It's the 3rd reading, and we will be meeting a week from tonight at 6 o'clock to review the CIP. So, and we have a second meeting, if necessary, scheduled for Tuesday.
Okay. Item 11 is the 2nd reading of ordinance.
Ordinance number 17-61, an ordinance amending the neglect of companion animals section of the Animal and Fowls chapter of the General Offenses Code.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Shulman?
Okay,
I should have waited, sorry.
This version that you are looking at is slightly changed based on the, I'll call it testimony we received last time and the feedback I got, preliminary feedback I received from council. Probably most substantively, we did use Cleveland as a basis to come up with a definition of shelter. Probably your attention to that section because it actually is it's very measurable and very enforceable. However, it definitely requires pretty robust things of a doghouse, which I don't think anyone would say is not a good idea, but I just don't know enough about dogs to know whether. Yes.
Since we have a full audience and the
Should I go over
students
what it
may
is?
have to report back, why don't you give a little bit more detail and bring them up to date?
I'd be
Just a
happy
thought.
to. I would be happy to. I don't usually have a crowd. A few months ago, Councilman Jones brought this issue up for council's consideration. A resident, Councilman Jones, will you help me on your the resident's name who brought the idea up? Basically to have an ordinance prohibiting or regulating what's known as tethering of dogs in yards. For lack of a better word, I would describe tethering as when you take the dog and you put a collar or a rope or a chain on it, you tether it to the ground. And so she observed that there were dogs being mistreated and how they were being tethered. So we, at council's direction, staff and I looked at different ordinances, tried to come up with an ordinance that would help protect the animals on one hand and also be enforceable by our, if necessary, police officers or our animal control staff in a way that if it went to court, we could prosecute that. So we were trying to walk that line between lots of robust protection, but also enforceability. So we came up with a draft, and then at the last meeting, we had some testimony from 3 eligible groups. I'm going to get it wrong, but it's the ASCPA and Humane Society, and I'm missing the 3rd. Or there's 3, and so we took testimony from them, and council had some initial feedback. So I went back to the draft and I added some more language to help address those concerns. And one of those was our first draft, just our old language said you have to provide the dog with shelter. And one of the testimony we received said, well, that's not defined, so shelter could be an overturned wheelbarrow or a branch of a tree, and that's not adequately protecting anybody. So we went back and looked at some examples, and we looked at Cleveland's ordinance, and so we tried to take from there and define what shelter would be. And some of the requirements are it's got to have walls and a roof to protect the sun and wind. It has to have a floor so the dog isn't on the dirt, and that floor has to be 2 inches off the ground to keep them from being in water if it's rained and gotten soggy. So we built that in. We also tried to require protections against the elements. That was what Councilwoman Keller suggested. So we tried to say you're to protect you from sun or cold or things like that. So those are the 2 changes that you'll notice in this draft. Is that a good enough description?
I think so.
And one thing else I would point out as a preview, actually 3 things I'll point out. First, we did send that draft to the 3 people who spoke last time. One of them has contacted me today, and she has some revisions she'd like to propose. I suggested that if she would send those to me, I would share them with council. So there's still an opportunity this could change. Second thing is there will probably be a style-only change in the order. We might flip what is now Section 1 down to Section 4 to make the impact of this will make it easier to understand what's going on. And then the final thing is we have not set a public hearing yet. So if you are happy enough with the form it's in now to start the process, I would recommend a motion to set a public hearing so we can continue to keep this ball rolling. I think we didn't set it yet because we were so amorphous that we weren't sure we were happy enough with the draft to get forward. So that would still provide opportunity to change after public hearing and between meetings, but that will allow us to continue to move this forward. So those are the things I had, unless you have more questions, Madam Mayor.
Any questions for Mr. Shulman?
Madam Mayor, I've spoken to a lot of the people that we've met. A lot of them were coming tonight for public. I told them to hold off until we actually put together public comment. One thing that I'm just letting everybody know now, they're going to pack the hall. So we're just preemptively prepared for a lot more chairs for the next meeting. But one thing that's going to come up, and I agree 100% with this, there still has to be a time issue on this. The group I'm working with have all agreed with the fact that police during the daytime is not, a 2-hour limit originally was, isn't feasible, but a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Time frame of no tethering is a lot easier to enforce. That's going to be coming across us at the next meeting is us to really put that in the ordinance. So I just give everybody a heads up on that. I agree with that 100%. I don't know whether we want to talk about that now or we want to.
So no time between 10 and 6?
No time between 10 and 6, but somehow there has to be we have to tweak it somehow where you could tether your dog outside like Mr. Rohr does, like to go to the restroom for a certain amount of time. But unattended, right. But, just to have the dog tethered outside from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m., nonstop is what we're trying to eliminate.
So that are not in the current draft, but they are pure policy questions. And one is, as Councilman Jones just stated, would be enforceable, but it's a question of whether that's the policy we want to take. Is one, it would be easy to enforce a prohibition from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. because you walk up, you see it, you violate it. It's very easy to enforce, but it's whether we want to do that. The second one that is not in there that we could is there was a suggestion by one of the testifiers that you can't have your dog tethered unattended.
That's the second point.
That would be enforceable in that you see a dog tethered, you can knock on the door if nobody's there. It's enforceable, but it's a policy question as to whether you want to go that far. One thing that I'm glad you brought that up. So both those things we could do, I can work them up, but it's just a question of whether you want to. One thing I wanted to share with the folks who are interested, and I will do that at the public hearing, is the second person, I think she was from ASCPA, but I don't know which one, said, you can do this in stages. And when you're at Congress or at our state house, you kind of have that one bite where you got to get that legislation done. And if you miss it, it's not in the budget, or it's, they'll never look at it again. This is certainly something where we can try one step, and then we can revisit it 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. We can bring it back up whenever we want. So I don't want anyone to feel like this is the only opportunity. So if we want to take baby steps, we could do that and then revisit it, even do a follow-up what's been working. So whether or not you decide to add these things in there, we could also add them in, 6 months later when we figure out what we have isn't helping. So I just want to throw that out there. I'll explain that to people as well, because I think people feel like if I don't get it perfect, it's not going to ever happen. And as you can see, it could. So.
Well, I guess with that all being said, I would, make a motion of some sort that we schedule a public hearing for the next meeting.
Well, wait a second. So if we do this 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., you can't have the dog out there tethered. But Mr. Rohr has to take his dog out at 3 in the morning. As long as he stays with them, that's okay?
Or you put a time frame on it, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, or whatever it is. I mean, it gets into the weeds a little bit, but the thing is, I mean, how many documents have we seen? In my opinion, we're getting way too. A lot of cities do this, and we're just kicking the can down the road here for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, it just makes no sense to me. I mean, City of Cleveland does it. I mean, I don't know why. You just make it, you can't tether your dog from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then if you do, we're not immediately, putting a fine on somebody, or it's an education process. If your dog has to go in the morning, you take your dog out and get it back in. You don't lock it up from,
Right.
12 p.m. until 6 a.m. or 12 a.m. to 6 a.m.
Okay.
And then I'm just giving you a fair warning. That is what we're going to hear for.
Well, then I'd rather it be in there so that we don't have it over and over and over somehow. If that's the wish of council that you
The
want
two things
this
we're
in
going to
there.
hear the most are the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and unattended. That's for the people who tie their dogs up and go to work all day because they're home in the house, and everybody in the neighborhood has to listen to a dog yapping,
Well, I think,
for 8-9 hours.
couldn't you just say can't be tethered out, unattended? Here.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
really, isn't that where we're coming at? That way you don't have a restriction. Hey, if I'm home, if I'm working third trick in the factory, I'm going at 2 a.m. I might have my dog tethered between 10 and midnight while I'm getting ready for work, and the dog's out there doing whatever he's doing in the yard. That's not a bad thing. Not everybody works 8 to 5 during the day, Monday through Friday. So just to blanketly say, well, it's night, so therefore you can't tether your dog, really discredits people that work something outside that normal time frame. But I think at the end of the day, we're really talking about unattended dogs
Absolutely.
that are tethered.
Absolutely.
So if somebody's home and I'm, drinking a coffee, getting ready for work, regardless if it's 10 in the morning or 10 at night,
So what if someone's sleeping and the dog is tethered outside?
that would be unattended.
So what's the
Because you-
definition of unattended?
We would have to.
Being able to pay attention to, in some way. So
I
I
could.
mean, if somebody wants to tie their dog up for a couple hours on a nice day and they have to be asleep or they run to Kroger, we're gonna fine them $150 for that?
I don't think we're going to find anybody out of the gate. I think we're going to let them know what the rules are.
that is true.
But that,
Which-
to me,
which-
that's not abuse of the dog. If you leave the dog outside on a nice day for a couple hours.
That's a nice day. We're talking about 10 p.m. till 6 a.m.
Well, he's saying 80 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I mean, I think it's one thing to protect dogs from being abused, it's another thing to have extreme overreach where
Yes.
we're basically limiting a number of things that aren't harming the dog because we happen to think that they're inappropriate.
Well, and that's also, then that kind of goes back to what I had on the prior discussion. I think I forwarded some stuff to Darren with regards to if we're concerned about humane treatment, that has nothing to do with tethering. Tethering can lead to, there can be inhumane treatment, with people that, too tight of collars and they get, sores on their necks and things. But our existing legislation that we have on our books today says you have to give your dogs care. The existing, we say it's public nuisance in 50508, excessive barking, whining, or howling, which a lot of people say, well, that's why they don't let dogs out at night. We come back here and say, shelter must be provided, which is dry, sanitary, and of suitable size. So that doesn't mean a bush. And again, a lot of this is subjective. However, again, you know, what are we trying to do? We're trying to educate people so that they don't, so they properly care for dogs or other animals, whatever domesticated animals are, that are in their charge. You know, reasonable, necessary veterinary care is also in our existing thing. Restraint devices must be a suitable size and secured to the animal in such a manner that the animal will not be injured. I mean, all the things that we've heard that people say tethering's all bad, it's already in our existing legislation. But if we want to micromanage and say this specific thing, yeah, then you get to that point of potential overreach. And
I think we get way too restricted. And we're not protecting the dog from harm, we just decide what people can
and can't do.
with their pet.
Yep.
Well, I mean, we did the same thing. We decided people can and can't have a basketball hoop in their driveway too. You know, is that overreach? I mean, I think it is. I mean, we said we can't.
We said they couldn't be in the street.
Well, yeah, but we also had to limit the part of where you couldn't, was it place something on the sidewalk too?
Oh, yeah, we did have something about playing with rocks in the street. Yeah, the old one said that. We did clean that up, but you're right. Obviously I don't have a policy decision. I will do my best to write up whatever direction I get from council. The reason our first draft was more streamlined was I'm always concerned about unintended consequences and not really knowing what's going to happen because we don't have a legislative research bureau like the State House does. So I always try to keep it lean and mean and narrow, but we can do more and try it, or we can go narrow and then add to it. But if you're discussing times of day and night and attending, I can get there with language. It might not be policy as far as you might not want to go that far, but I can do that. I couldn't in good conscience talk about the 6 hours in an 8-hour window just because that'd be unenforceable. But these are very enforceable and I could write them. I just don't know if that's as far as you want to go.
So let me understand, Chris, what you're saying is if we make it 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., then anytime a dog would be tethered, and then that would make it easy for the police department to say, I don't have to sit here from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Dogs can't be tethered during the
Right, they're doing a routine patrol. They're doing a routine patrol, and they notice that 123 Oak Street has a dog out at 4 a.m. Then we send them a letter letting them know that you can't tether your dog from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and there's no ticket issued unless it's happen to come past it again, just like we do with other things too.
So how big a problem is this? Are you getting calls for dogs that are tethered at night?
This will be a piece of legislation that enforcement will really be complaint driven. Probably the underlying issue is dogs that are unattended that are causing other problems, either problems with their neighbors, barking, the yard isn't cleaned up. So it really will be a complaint driven issue, which a lot of our ordinance, our codified ordinance is about 6 inches thick. So a lot of that stuff is complaint driven. I think the practicality of, just saying unattended is feasible. I agree with Darren. We could do it either way. I just would reiterate, it would really be hard to look at time frames and hours on and hours off, but I think we could do that on the wish of council.
But I guess my point is, if the dog is barking and creating a nuisance, if the dog is not being cared for because of the weather, whatever, those things are already in our code and they're in this code without prohibiting tethering in general.
Correct. The only benefit would be when we have a barking complaint, we need a victim to file that charge. In this case, if we got there and then the secondary complaint was it's barking and it's tethered and unattended, then we could enforce that.
One aspect that it might be worth asking the chief about is unattended during the day. He's got, is it a CSO on duty?
Correct.
So a CSO on duty is probably the one who would handle that complaint. If we get a complaint-driven call at night, that would be your regular police officer.
Well, an officer will respond to it and then refer it to the CSO. Is typically what happens with the animal complaints.
But in terms of like someone actually showing up to observe the offense would be a police officer time, not CSO
Correct.
time. The good news is, I think this is potentially the last, I don't know, call it 50%, 20%, 10%. I think the feedback we've gotten so far, what we have is an improvement for a lot of folks. So we're now talking about, from a B to an A or a C to an A, or I don't want to put a grade on it, but I think it's extra from what we have now. I think Chief is right. We already have a lot of the language to protect them now, but this is a little bit more explicit, has a little bit more teeth. And then the question is, do you want to go the next step? Do we set a date yet, or do we?
Maybe Darren, you should, process-wise, if nothing gets added tonight and you set this for a hearing, then it would have to be an amendment. It'd have to be a.
Well, and I can even draft some like sample amendment language. I've done that in the past and distribute it so you can see what it looks like and we can play around with that. And we don't have to only go through readings if we continue to have some good tweaking here and there. But I think I have a sense as to what we anticipate. Some thanks to our Councilman Jones' heads up, we can come up with some potential amendments that we can look at and discuss, and you'll have the language as opposed to writing on the fly. I'd be happy to do that so we don't slow down the hearing process. And I think a lot of people are going to want to comment on it, so I'd rather not spend months hashing it out with us when we can have the feedback on the formal process, because we've amended things after hearings before.
It's just like anything else we sit here and do, You had to make a decision whether or not you thought chickens were good for, residential use. You had to think whether or not zoos were good for the city of Delaware. So you have to make a decision. Do you think tethering is cruelty to animals? I do. Not afraid to admit it, not afraid to say it. So 6 of you have to make that decision too. So that's all I'll say.
Okay.
Circuses.
Circuses, not zoos.
Zoos, yes.
We like zoos.
So I have a motion to set the hearing by Mr. Jones. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Do we need to determine the date?
I think he said for the next meeting in his actual motion.
No, I think we had planned on the second meeting in October, right, Elaine?
Yeah, 23rd. I think it was.
Yeah.
Are you okay with
I think that was what the preference was, because we have the door up.
Yeah, no, that's 23rd is fine.
All right. So the motion is for the 23rd.
But it's to set this piece of legislation currently before them.
Yes. And I will, without a motion, bring some sample amendments that folks can take a look at. I'll distribute them in advance and can look at them.
Roll call.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer? Mayor Riggle?
Yes. And item 12 is consideration of resolution number 17-57. And if you'll please finish that.
Resolution number 17-57, a resolution designated outdoor refreshment area, the DORA, for downtown Delaware and enacting regulations.
Mr. Shag, sure, Jackie's going.
He's over here telling me it's Darren.
No, it's me.
Yes.
I'll assist, but I will not say.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, Madam Mayor. Before council tonight is the DORA application. It has been, this is the beginning of the countdown. If you remember, there's a timeline associated with the DORA.
Can you explain what a DORA is to our audience?
Oh,
young
sure,
students?
sure.
We hope they're not going to use it, but just let them know what it is.
Right, so the DORA is a designated outdoor refreshment area, and ours is specified for the downtown area, and it would allow people who are visiting our downtown to be able to carry wine or beer in a specially marked cup from one drinking establishment like that have a liquor permit, and be able to carry it around the designated area instead of having to kind of save a seat at an outdoor cafe. It gives them an opportunity to go in and out of the stores that permit them to carry such things. And this is something that's new to cities our size, and it was brought up that we might be interested in this. So we've gone through a very long process of trying to figure out how to make this, how to enact this. And the state of Ohio, the city of Delaware has to apply to the state of Ohio to be allowed to do this. As you know, or maybe you don't know, is that you're not allowed to carry open containers for alcoholic beverages. You must be at a permit holder's specific location. So state of Ohio, if a city's interested, the state asks that you apply to the state for this permission. And they're very regulated about who can have it and how you go about the process. So tonight actually begins the initial time clock on this. And so the first stage of this is the actual application to City Council submitted by City Manager Tom Homan. And then we'll have 1 to 2 public hearings on this, and then it will go to the state. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we should point out, I believe it's included in the packet, that Main Street Delaware did provide a letter regarding this, supporting, not opposing it. And I think you received copies of that. And Councilman Hellinger had asked me for a copy of that survey, and I believe we got that to you. I didn't know if you had any.
Yeah, didn't actually get the wording of what the survey was. It was just tabulation of responses, which was kind of.
I'm
We
sorry.
can have that for you.
I thought I said that. I had the actual questions.
Yeah, exactly. What was the question that
Oh,
was
I had
asked?
it. Yeah, that should have gone.
Sure. We can see.
Because on the tally page, it was like, I don't know, do you support it or? I think
Okay.
it's kind of what that column said. And I don't know what that
Thought
word.
we had that.
So we'll send, be happy to send that out. We do have some time with this to make sure we have all the Ts crossed and Is dotted. And so we'll make sure that we send out what were the questions, and you already have the responses.
Yes.
And then I don't believe the letters from Main Street was included in the packet, but it was sent under separate cover to city council members via email. I believe Tom sent it at
Sent
the
it
end of
Friday,
last
yeah.
week.
Yeah, sent it out Friday.
Okay. So are there any questions that I can ask for you? I know that we had a member of the Main Street Board call who is also an employee of Ohio Wesleyan, asked if we could adjust the Spring Street boundary so that it did not include the north side of Spring Street, which would be contiguous to Ohio Wesleyan's campus. I told him, I told Mr. Hatcher that I could go ahead and make the change, but I wanted to make you aware that I had made that small shift. I didn't, obviously it's at the pleasure of council. If there are any other boundaries you want changed, if you, basically this is a good time, as well as the public hearings, to tell us what it is in the application that you would like to see changed. Or
If anything.
Or if anything.
Yeah.
So where would the boundary be now? You took off the north side?
Currently, I took off the north side of Spring Street, but it can be added back in. It was a
So-
discussion at Main Street that was something that
I thought we
would be
went to Spring.
it's on the south side.
Oh,
No, I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong directions. The south side of Spring Street, which is contiguous to Ohio Wesleyan, they wanted that taken off, but we go to Spring.
right,
Yes.
that's what I always thought it was.
Yeah, no, it actually was on both sides. So we went ahead and just designated that boundary.
Because there's really nothing there, but yes, that makes total sense.
Right.
Thank you.
We thought so too. Once you look at it, yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
So is the map in our packet the current map?
Yes,
With the change to Spring Street.
yes.
Yeah, it's not square.
Right here.
When you see it, it makes total sense.
Yeah. That's reasonable.
And so right now, the events are the New Moon, Half Marathon, and possibly the car show. We just don't.
Right. We tried to reach out to the folks at the car show. There was to be a board meeting today, but I've been out of the office most of the day, so I didn't hear exactly what they had decided, unless I'm getting a text now. But we will find out for sure about the car show.
So Jackie, I have, the way it's written now, we've identified 2 qualifying events. Do we have to come before council every time there's another event, or can the special event committee approve that it as a special?
To be done with the special events, yes,
The committee can do that?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I can't speak for anybody else, be curious, but I've only received really 1 phone call against this. And they were under the impression this was a every Friday and Saturday, year-round type thing. Once I explained, the meat behind it, seemed a lot more receptive and fine with it. So,
That's the only complaint I've had too,
okay.
thinking it's an everyday event.
And I guess it would be important to note, not just for council, but anyone that is interested in the DORA and how the process is evolving, is that the application is only the beginning of the work that needs to be done, right? So staff then needs to take on the responsibility of educating our downtown merchants, educating those that might be interested in having a special event downtown. Our police department will get involved. They'll designate the cups. I mean, if the DORA goes through. So we just don't drop it when the application's filed, right? So there's a lot of education that has to go on to our downtown businesses and residents, and obviously the residents of the contiguous neighborhoods. So I don't want anyone to get the impression that it's a free-for-all after the applications. There's a lot of work that goes into it after that.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome. And then we have a public hearing on October 9th at 7:30.
Right. Okay, moving on to consideration of ordinance number 17-62.
Ordinance number 17-62, an ordinance amending the employment agreement with the city manager.
Oh. Jared?
Sure. Madam Mayor, members of council, this employment agreement for the city manager has 2 changes. First change is the annual increase. That's probably in the first paragraph or 2. The second change is changing the date of next year, not this year, next year's effective date to line up more appropriately with all the other pay plans and contracts, except for, I think, fire and police, which have their own times, to line them up at the end of the year. So that's later on in the document. Those are the only 2 changes with answer questions.
Any questions? Okay, this is the first reading. Do you want to take it to a second reading?
With the, according to the sort of complaint we came up with like 3 retreats ago,
Right.
things, when possible, things regarding pay increases, we try to go 3 readings if we can. Is that correct, Tom?
Yep.
Okay. Move on to item 14, which is consideration of ordinance number 17-53. 63. Just put my glasses on.
Ordinance number 17-63, an ordinance determining that the amendment to petition for expansion of the Northern New Community Authority complies with the requirements of section 349.03 of the Ohio Revised Code, and to fix a date and place for a public hearing on the amendment to petition for expansion.
Ms. Jocelyn?
Madam Mayor, members of council, members of the audience, I have a visual aid for you after the computer finished updating here. This is in your packet, council members. This is the first formal step in expanding the Northern New Community Authority. A new community authority is a quasi-governmental body, technically, that essentially is used for financing of lots of things. In this case, one thing, public infrastructure in Glen Road, one primary thing. In red, you see the original area, which is the Glenwood Commons Shopping Center, where Kohl's and Myers is today. And in green, hatch is where apartments known as Quail Pass Apartments, we also know them as the Redwood Apartments, depending on when you approve them. But that entire green area is for the Quail Pass Apartments area. So there are a number of steps outlined by the NCA Council, the attorney for the NCA. And the Ohio Revised Code outlines a series of steps. This is the first of them. you're technically determining that the application we received was sufficient to the Ohio Revised Code. And I can report to you as staff, it's sufficient. So we hope that you find that as well. The second thing that this does is it sets the formal public hearing for the amendment itself for October 23rd after a series of advertisements that the clerk has to make. So we would ask for your passage on this first reading, or we have to start back over with the dates of the hearing and such. It's all prescribed by Ohio Revised Code. The important thing to remember here is that I think this is fairly perfunctory at the end of the day. The applicant signed a declaration of intent to levy the 7.5 mil charge. That was sufficient to levy the charge and collect the charge up to this point, and this takes the final formal steps. We'll be doing the same thing for the Southern NCA once we can collect all the signatures from the various developers, some of whom actually don't exist anymore, but we'll figure that out at a point in time in the future. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
And just to echo what Dave said, the reason we're coming and requesting a first reading is not because we haven't prepared it, but the way that code sets those timeframes, we just couldn't build it out. So it's not a lack of planning or anything like that on Dave's part.
You'll have to blame the state of Ohio for their process.
Don't call you
I don't know
a
what to
slacker.
tell you.
Okay.
Trying to follow it.
So any questions for Dave?
Madam Mayor, I move we suspend the rules on 3 readings for ordinance 1763.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Jones, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, I move for the adoption of ordinance 1763.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 15 is finance report. Mr. Stelzer.
The finance report through the end of August was included in the packet. I noted a couple highlights on the first page. It's so far been a pretty routine year. Nothing substantial sticks out. Tax collection's a little bit less than what we had budgeted, but not substantially. Entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you. City manager's report.
Couple of items. If you get a chance, after 8:30 every night until midnight, there's a really interesting exhibit on the Ross Art Museum. It's a video display of both moving pictures and still pictures taken from the archives of Ohio Wesleyan as well as the Delaware County Historical Society, and they're displayed up on the Ross Art Museum. It's really interesting postcards from the past, movies, 8mm movies, those kind of stuff. And it's called The Shadows We Cast, and it's the event kicked off last week. Councilman Browning and Vice Mayor Schaefer were able to get there. We knew the mayor couldn't because of the fair. That was a tough week. They did it, I think, the night of the Jug or Jugette. So, but anyway, if you get a chance, it's through October. Great event. Barb Browning and John Hunter, longtime city employees in our finance department. John is our income tax administrator, and Barb works in our accounts payable department. They've been here almost 30 years, and they will be retiring. There will be an event for them this Friday. So if you get a chance, stop down and wish them well in their retirement. Barb will be joining her husband Tim, who retired a few years ago from the city. So
What time is the return?
I think it's at what
3 to
time?
5.
3 to 5.
It's at
3 seasons.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's here.
Mingo. No,
No,
it's
3 seasons.
Mingo 3 Seasons Shelter House.
And thanks to Councilman Hellinger for a couple of years ago bringing it to our attention the deficiency that we needed a sidewalk between Bueller's and Lexington. That is almost complete, and already people are asking about part 2, which would go from Lexington to Houck Road. So as we talk about the CIP next Monday night, we can discuss that. But really, that's going to be it's long overdue and underscores the need to get it all the way to Houck Road at some point. Sewer master plan, we've recently completed that. I'll be sending out the executive summary for that, so you can take a look at that in preparation for the CIP for next Monday night. I have a meeting with Superintendent Rafe tomorrow from Orange County Schools regarding Glen Parkway, getting the connection up to Berlin Station Road. Now that they're opening a 4th high school next fall, they're very interested in what those road connections will be. So we'll be discussing that as well as other kind of growth and development issues. And that is it for me.
Okay.
And hats off to the mayor for the brown jug and the fair. It went off well, and I don't know how many of you were able to get to the merchant building to see the city's display, but we had stuff there. How many of you got to the fair? All right. Did you just stop at the merchants building and stop at the City of Delaware's booth there? All right.
Okay, council comments. Start with Mr. Jones.
Two brief ones. These are both for Director Farino. I got a complaint over the weekend. If you're heading east on Merrick Boulevard, where it intersects with Houck Road, that stop sign, the trees are growing there. It's hard to see that stop sign until you're about a car length away from it. So somebody can take a look at it. And the question for multi-family facilities, when the city contracts trash, does the city determine the size of the trash units, or is that something that's negotiated as part of, if that makes sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it's really negotiable for when we're providing refuse service for multifamily. We look at their needs, the available space, and we'll maybe come up with 6-yard dumpsters, 8-yard dumpsters, or some
So
combination.
that's determined by the city then?
Yes.
Okay.
With input from the property owner.
Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Keller?
I have something.
Okay.
So I received a complaint from a constituent in my neighborhood after the mosquito spraying that took place in the city. And she said that she was walking her dog at about 8 p.m. outside, and that the mosquito truck went by, and she thought that the truck had sprayed her. And she's an older lady, so she was very upset by this. She brought me a typed letter of complaint asking for the name of the chemicals that were sprayed on her and her dog, and said that she immediately went inside and washed her dog and washed herself. And she was very, very upset by this. So I called the health department and was able to speak to someone very helpful, and they explained that when they're driving down the road and they see a person walking a dog, that they're able to turn off the sprayer. And so she didn't realize that. So I asked them if they would sort of explain a little bit about that they're not going to drive around and spray her. She felt like they had sped up, which I would assume they were speeding up to get past her. But to her, it appeared that they were speeding up to purposely spray her as she was trying to run away. So we got that confusion worked out, and she felt better. But in the process of actually looking into what it is that we are driving around spraying, I discovered some concerns that I wanted to, initiate a discussion with the health department about some of the health concerns of spraying, not spraying, and whether it's been tested on people long-term, and just kind of hoping to learn a little bit more about what the risks are and if there is an opt-out for our community. So other communities have opted out. There's a city in near Cleveland called Lyndhurst that passed an ordinance in their city that banned mosquito fogging because of the health concerns about the chemicals that are being sprayed. Full disclosure, I'm a very natural-oriented person. I eat organic. We have an organic garden that I fear is no longer organic now that it's been sprayed. And so just trying to advocate from that perspective of being a person who's concerned about cancer rates and chemicals and trying to eliminate a lot of that from my life. What is the risk benefit of doing this in our community? So just looking, I can keep going, just looking at the chemical information sheet that's provided by the health department. I mean, right in the very middle of the paper, it's harmful if swallowed, inhaled, or absorbed through the skin. It causes eye irritation, skin irritation. It may cause allergic reactions. It's toxic to aquatic organisms, including fish. It's toxic to bees. And so those are things that jump out at me as it's saying right in its own safety information that this is poison. And two of the chemicals that are being sprayed in the city, permethrin has never really been tested on humans, and it's a suspected carcinogen. There's all kinds of information indicating that there's liver toxicities and reproductive toxicities associated with it. The other chemical that is being sprayed, there's information out there that shows that it has adverse impacts on the liver and that it may be linked to cancer also. Myself well, but nobody wants to die of some mosquito-borne issue either. So I'm no health expert, and so we have the health experts here to help me out, but West Nile virus is something that people are really dying from that I can read. It's a pretty mild illness for most people, according to the CDC. Most people don't even know they have it, like 8 out of 10 people. Of that, 250 people would have to have West Nile virus in order for one to have a serious complication. And most of the time, those serious complications don't result in death. So West Nile, I decided, doesn't really scare me that much. These chemicals scare me more than West Nile. The same with lacrosse encephalitis. I mean, I think this is rare stuff. And so my question is, are we really being safer by spraying it because we're only getting the mosquitoes that happen to be active at that time in this area of our city? And so a mosquito with West Nile that lives in the first ward could fly over after we spray to the second ward, and we're really no safer. And so they wait until we have a infected mosquito before we spray. So the day before we sprayed, were we all in terrible danger, and then after we spray, we're all okay? And so if it's not super effective, maybe we should consider not spraying toxic stuff in our community and working with the health department to help spread mosquito awareness that there are other things people can do. Like what I spray on my body is up to me. So if I choose to spray something that I feel is not toxic, I can still protect myself against mosquitoes. And everyone can make those decisions of what they spray on themselves, by themselves. So that's where I'm coming from. I'd like to see us stop the practice.
Okay, this is public comment, so I really don't want to bring the health department up now and get into this, but I think for a discussion we should have with them.
Okay.
Okay. We'll schedule something, put him on the agenda. Is that good? You have any time that you're supposed to spray again soon?
We only spray when there's disease, so
Okay.
as of right now, there's no plans to spray the city.
Okay, thank you. Is that all right with you?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd love to just, I'm sure there's things that you can contribute to the discussion too. I reached out to Sustainable Delaware and wanted to see if perhaps they might want to be involved in the discussion also, just so that we're kind of just having this discussion from a bunch of different perspectives, because I'm no expert, but I have concerns.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have nothing to report.
Mr. Vaughn?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Hellier?
Just two things,
Just two?
just two. And they're kind of way over here and way over there.
Okay.
So the first thing was, I talked to a lady today and had a conversation with a couple other people prior to today with regards to the bag.
Okay.
The bag, yes.
And this is, I think,
Councilman Browning had
the third time that I've brought this up, and I know, Darren, we've had some discussion with that. And,
The bag. In case you guys don't know.
that gets hung on your mailbox.
Everyone knows.
Or thrown in the
Or
street.
thrown in your yard to get soggy and then thrown in.
There's not a hook on your mailbox.
or in your storm sewers or whatever. So, you know, and in my conversations with these people are saying, you know, there's a lot of people say, oh, I love it. I look forward every Sunday morning to go out and get the bag. And it's like, hey, that's good. You know, good for you. There's other people that say, you know, it's a pain. I don't like it. It's littering. Why can't they just not send it? They say they call the dispatch. They request not to get it. They continue to get it. And, you know, I've called the dispatch myself. I've had them stop it after a couple calls. But, they always say, well, we have subcontractors that go out there and do that. So really, it's up to them. So they just kind of push the ball down the road and don't claim responsibility for it. Some of these people that don't want it say, well, why can't you require people to opt into it? And trying to put on my Darren hat today, I went out there and looked, and yeah, it's a First and 14th Amendment issue in that you have to allow them to distribute information, even if it's all commercial in advertising. So, so I looked at our ordinance, 70501, on advertising, and Darren, and it's the good old Oxford comma question here on this. No person, firm, or corporation shall place or cause to be placed advertising material of any description, including but not limited to newspapers, magazines, handbills, or posters, upon public property or upon private property if the owner, person in charge, tenant, or occupant of such private property has requested that no advertising material be placed upon such private property by posting a sign stating no advertisement in a conspicuous place on the front of the residence or near the front door. That's paragraph A. Then paragraph B is no person, firm, or corporation shall place advertising material on private property unless it is placed on the front porch or step of the residence in a secure manner so as to prevent it from being blown or scattered about. So again, it kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about the whole tethering deal. We already have the laws, but we don't enforce them. Now, my question to you, Darren, is in A there, does that say, as I read that, it says it can't be on public property, period.
Correct.
And if that's the case, all the distribution of the bag is illegal because it's all placed in the street lawn by people's mailboxes.
I'm not sure if it's in a street lawn or in their driveway.
Either way,
It's typically attached to the mailbox, and if there isn't a hook to attach it, they just throw it, and it generally lands in the tree lawn, which is
They don't
technically.
get out of their car. They
Yeah, they
drive
don't-
and they just toss.
Yeah, they just drive it across. So if
I think your strongest probably avenue would actually probably be B, which is it's not placed on the steps in a secure manner on the private property part of it. If they're just throwing it on the driveway and it's getting all blown around, that's probably stronger than is the mailbox area private, even though it's kind of in a right of way. It's kind of that's probably more of a gray area. You're just letting it flutter all around and potentially even littering, which we've looked at before.
So can we do some type of education back to the district?
Yeah.
And enforcement to tell them, hey, I'm not saying people can't get this, but I do. I go around, I pick them up out of the street. I pick them out of the storm sewer sometimes. They're just everywhere.
What does it say the penalty is for?
It is a minor misdemeanor. It just says whoever violates any provision of this chapter is guilty of minor misdemeanor.
I think that one of the struggles we've had before when we looked at it under maybe possibly littering, because you can't just throw stuff all over the ground. I don't know if we can really know who it is. I guess we could try to go after the publisher, but as you mentioned, it's some guy or gal driving around in a car and throwing it down, but it doesn't say Darren's Legal Services. It's all the ads, so we don't know who that person is throwing it down to go after them. Maybe Dave has a better way. Do you know who they are, these folks, or?
No.
But, and wouldn't that be, they're contractors of the dispatch printing company. They have to know who their agents are. They're acting as their agent, to distribute the goods, right?
Could we
I didn't know
regulate
they were
it
dispatched.
and indicate that if they can't just throw it, that if there is a hook on your mailbox, presumably you want to get this thing. If you don't put the hook there.
They put the
They
hook
put the
there.
thumbtack in.
Sometimes, yeah.
Well,
We took ours
Really?
out and now they throw it in the grass.
right, but I would say that in that case, they can't, that we could regulate that. They're prohibited from throwing the thing.
I think you could regulate it right now under the don't
Then let's
throw it.
just pursue it. We'll just
Well,
have
what
to
we may
send
want to
out
do is instead of
a letter
saying,
to the publishers and tell them.
we may want to revise our ordinance to make it a little bit more user-friendly and say, if you put it on private property, it's got to be placed on a hook on a mailbox or the front board. Because I don't think anyone's going to want people getting out of the car and walking up and putting something on your
You can't enforce that against the company, though, only against the person that does it.
Well, we could probably, I think we'd start by sending them a formal letter
Well, here's,
advising them of our.
here's the weirdest thing about it, Councilman Orr. The ordinance written in 1980 says having it there is prima facie evidence of a violation by the person, firm, or corporation distributing the material, or the advertiser. So I guess you can go after Kroger's now because they advertised in the bag. So I would not recommend doing that.
Bag, isn't there also this week?
Yeah, there's a This Week newspaper.
Which is
Go to the press.
Well, because I get the same paper that I get in the bag is
Right.
in the Dispatch.
It's in the Sunday
Exactly
Dispatch.
the same
Yes.
one.
If you subscribe to the Dispatch on Sunday,
Yeah.
you don't get that. You don't get the bag.
It's probably
I think you're
helpful.
paper.
I don't even know if I was aware last time that this was a dispatch related thing. So that's at least somewhere we can start talking to them. Because before I didn't know who the bag
We'll
was.
follow up.
Okay.
We'll follow up. And I think just get a formal letter advising them and I can work with Darren on
Send them a copy
getting
of-
something to the contractors as well because
And,
that's where-
and you did a very good job of playing me for the day. So we can't ban speech, but we can regulate time, place, and manner and effects of speech. So we can't say you can't get the stuff out, but if we say it's got to be clean, you can't litter, you got to put it on the porch or hook, I think those are potentially reasonable. So.
We may have already
Differentiate
done
between the
We already
paper,
did.
paper,
Right,
the
we-
Dispatch and the Gazette, throw the paper in your driveway.
Right.
This is-
Well, newspapers
But-
are on the porch. Dispatch is in my driveway.
You pay for the Dispatch or the Gazette, so you are contracting with them to do that, and with the bag, it's delivered to everyone.
I just want to make sure our ordinance doesn't.
I mean, it might, it might have problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, my paper was going to jail.
Okay,
All
what's
right,
your
so-
second thing?
all right, so yeah, that was 7:05. Now, if we want to talk about, Darren, come back to me, bro.
Sorry, next time.
To 334, and I don't have the whole thing, but anyways, back in traffic, vehicle, this has to do with the use of hearing protection in a motor vehicle. And, saying except if you're a refuse driver or safety vehicle or, there's those usual exceptions. You cannot wear hearing protection in both ears. And that's also a state law. The state is actively working to change that through Motorcycle Ohio. Motorcyclists have a lot of excessive wind noise, whether you wear a $700 Schuberth helmet or a $50 Kmart helmet, you get excessive wind noise. And it's important to have, to be able to protect your hearing, because once it's gone, it's gone. So when I teach my classes, when we talk about this, I always tell people, we always advocate wearing hearing protection. They say, well, is it legal? It's like, no, but unless Barney Fife is the guy that pulls you over, you're not going to get a ticket because cops know you're just trying to protect your hearing and you can hear just fine with, like the roll-up foam plugs that I keep in my ears. I can hear traffic. It doesn't affect anything. But I think that is something that we and knowing that it's also coming through the state channels to get this changed also, I would like to at least to see that changed from a motorcycling standpoint. Because it's not enforceable, realistically, it's not enforceable. And you're putting people's hearing at risk to comply with the law. So just something to ponder and think about.
For the record, that is 331.40.
Oh, darn it.
You were close.
I thought it was 334. Okay. So that's all I got.
All right, Mr. Shea?
Nothing, thank you.
I got a call on the light at Houghton Central. Again, you can, if you're the first car, let's say that you're going.
No, I'm just
He's
picturing.
whispering in my ear.
Picturing
now
it.
here. If you're the first one in that light and you want to turn left,
Going southbound on Houck.
yes,
Yep.
you can sit there through 3 cycles.
Right.
I run the red light, arrest me. I'm fed up with it. Do something. We
Well-
gotta do something.
Get out the cuffs.
Do some.
Darren?
It's just, you sit there forever. If you're the only one, it's late at night,
Right.
you're the only one.
We'll watch again. I
Just
mean,
will
we've
not
seen a
change.
number of people that are off the detector that do call us. I'm not
I
saying.
rolled
that
back
you're in there.
I roll forward,
Yep.
and it just doesn't do anything. So I just go through.
What we can do is look to see if we upgrade the cameras there. And that way we can put more than one zone so that kind of expand that zone where you need to capture people who are not necessarily on the loop detector.
Okay. So that was one. And then I talked to you guys before about, I have a gentleman that we got a handicap space in front of his home. During Fair Week, everybody else parked in front of his space because he was gone. And so when he comes home, he's got no place to park. His ramp is in his front yard. So I don't know how we can specify that space to that address, but the poor man, I just felt, he came to my house twice. I don't know what else to do for him. So when's the next parking meeting?
Well, when we make those recommendations, we get those occasionally that people want handicap spaces because they have a hardship and they don't have parking on their own, on their private property. So we will recommend a handicap space in front of their residence in the public parking area. But we also let them know it's not their space, that's available for anyone who's handicapped.
This gentleman is in a wheelchair, never has been out of it. He has no way to get into his home.
As Chief is saying, we can designate a spot as a handicap spot, but if someone else with the handicap tag wanted to park there for whatever, they could have it and be there, and that's the one, we can't say this is your particular spot.
But if
So
they don't have the placard, they can't.
they have to have a placard, but it could be anyone with a placard, not just the individual who lives there.
It's his house. He's the one who came to us and said, I need this.
So it is marked right now, is what
Yes,
you're saying?
it's
Oh, it's
handicap.
just someone else with a handicap
Yeah.
spot parked there.
And then went to the fair.
It's the Fair Week, right?
See, I mean, that seems like there must be something we
I
can do.
know.
Why don't you see if we can problem solve?
Don't we make the rules?
That's what I kind of
We
think.
can, let's take it offline and see if we can problem solve.
Okay.
It may not be solvable, but Bruce is looking at it and he's thinking.
Slippery slope.
Just, maybe you eliminate that handicap space during that time.
I don't know. Okay. And the last thing I did is, Bill, did we get the parts in for Troy and Barrett and Pennsylvania Heritage?
Yes, that project
Please.
actually started today.
Thank
So
you.
when they're up, you'll see them. It should not be too long now.
Good.
And all students crossing Pennsylvania or Troy use those lights, those pedestrian activated crossing signals.
Yes.
And before we adjourn, all of you that need something signed, come to any one of the council members and we will sign them, your paperwork for you. And each of you sign behind your name, put whatever you what slide is. Now I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a second?
Second. No, I was really sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No, okay.